yeah, we got to overturn.
You're listening to the E-Men, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit.
And let me just state for the record, if he doesn't show up in the live chat tonight, which he usually does for an ESU show, Steve Stefanakis, I better see you in the chat tonight. You always have some slick comment, either for me or for the guest, because you know everybody that's ever worked in ESU. And so I better see you tonight. For those of you watching, you, of course, know my good friend Steve. He works in 10 truck. He's never going to retire. They're going to have to carry him out of there kicking and screaming. And he goes back to the old housing police emergency rescue unit days because he was a housing guy. Came over in 1994. It's been 32 years in the unit. And the man's been in the unit longer than I've been alive. So that guy is a legend with a capital L. And we got T-minus 4 years before you can finally come on the show, my friend. Anyway, we got a great guest tonight. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode 415 of the Mike Black podcast. It'll be volume 58 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. A lot of you were excited about this guest. I am too. When am I not, right? It's always great talking about E-Men and E-Women. And we have certainly a good one tonight that came on post 9/11 era. You know, we chronicle a lot of the guys that were in the unit pre 9/11. That's good too. But we got a lot of guys, a lot of rock stars really, that put in the work post 9/11 in a very different New York City. And it's important we talk about that chapter of the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, which just turned 96 years old, by the way. Still getting it done all these years later. April of 1930. Of course, the anniversary, I believe, was 5 days ago. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, that was volume 86 of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FDNYs and Lee. We had to rush it because for those of you that will catch it, I got held over for mandatory overtime at dispatch, which is lovely. I asked for my break to be at 6 o'clock, ran down to the second floor of the police department, did the show in an hour, ran back up and kept dispatching till midnight. So we got it done for you guys, and we're definitely going to bring Gary back for a part 2 because he's got a lot of cool stories to tell. Don't want to keep tonight's guest rating. Of course, he shares my first name, so us Mikes got to stick together. We're going to run a couple ads, though, first, and the first one is from my man, Granite State.
Hey there, firefighters and fire buffs. If you're tuning into the Mike Black podcast, you know the value of reliable gear. At Granite State Fire Helmets, we're proud to introduce the TL2, our premium leather Phoenix fire helmet. The TL2 is all about comfort, durability, and that timeless style you trust. And here's the best part. All in-stock inventory usually ships within 24 hours, so you'll have it in your hands in no time. Plus, our company is proudly owned and operated by firemen, so you know we've got your back and understand exactly what you need out there on the front lines. So don't wait. Gear up with the TL2 today. Granite State Fire Helmets, where tradition meets innovation, and where firemen have you covered.
Gotta start getting some police sponsors too. I love my fire sponsors, but if we can get some police sponsors, besides, of course, my friend Billy Ryan, that would be very good. Speaking of Billy Ryan, of course, let's run his ad too.
The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD Detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast.
When we get to the rapid fire, I'll air Vinny's ad, of course. Thanks to Bill. And thanks to Deputy Chief Brett King over in the Granite State. And my next guest built his career around service long before he even wore the NYPD shield, as he'll tell me about tonight. He joined the United States Navy in peacetime in 1999 and trained as an air crewman and search and rescue specialist, flying aboard H-60 helicopters and operating with the Fleet Squadron during the early years of the post-9/11 era. Of course, peacetime would tragically end 2 years later after he joined. And when his military service ended, he thought to himself, you know what? Why not try for the NYPD? And he was successful. Got on in 2005, spent really all of his career, or the vast majority of his career in Brooklyn, was a 9-4 precinct guy for a majority of that time, as he'll tell me about tonight. And then in 2012, up the ante when he joined the Emergency Service Unit, where he finished out his career just last year, retiring after 20 years of service. And that, for this volume 58 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, a personal recommendation from my man Kenny Delaney, Mr. Mike Black. Mike, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
You too, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And he's a Ranger fan too. So listen, he's got my first name. He's a Ranger fan, and he's an E-man. What could be better? So we'll get
All
into
good
it.
thing.
All a good thing, of course. And before we touch on your career, both in the Navy and later on the NYPD, as I ask everybody, tell me about the early years. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in St. James, Long Island, a little North Shore town. Went to high school out there, Smithtown High School. Graduated in '98. Started my career service right after that. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to say, it's an interesting transition because 1998 is when, as you said, you graduate high school, and you're not even old enough to drink a beer yet, buy a beer yet, and then right into the Navy in 1999. So what prompted that decision?
You know what? I was kind of a different. Um, Most kids going to school, going to college, and stuff like that. And I think from
Hang on, Mike. You might want to disconnect the AirPods because it's kind of cutting into your audio. Yeah, sometimes they do that.
got me.
There we go. Perfect. Go ahead.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's kind of like a different kid. I knew pretty much at a young age I wanted to join the military. I had an uncle that was a Marine, and I have an aunt and an uncle that were in the Navy, that are in the Navy. And it just kind of always fascinated me. What is that? What do you do? And kind of always asking questions about it. And, always, I wanted to join the Marine Corps, from, I think age 8 on. And then funny circumstances happened, and I ended up joining the Navy and becoming a SAR swimmer in the Navy.
So I'll tell you, or I'll ask you rather, boot camp is boot camp across the board. I've had a few guys that were in the Army Rangers on this program. Our buddy Keith Gallagher was an Army Ranger, so I've heard stories from him over the years on what that was like. Definitely some Marines on this program as well. The Navy boot camp, what is that like?
It's challenging. You learn all about, boot camp's boot camp. It is what it is. It's a basic training, like any other branch of service. Maybe not as loud as the Marine Corps, I'll say, but you're definitely getting physically tested, getting mentally tested, and learning. You're learning all about, traditions of the Navy and how to do basic jobs, throughout the Navy for 2 months. So.
Right. And that was the case. It's a lot to learn in a very condensed amount of time. There's a lot of things being thrown at you. You were in it from September of 1999 to November of 1999. You graduate, you do what you have to do, but then comes search and rescue school a little bit longer, January to July of 2000.
Yeah, so the actual school is only so you go to air crew school first, and then if you can complete air crew school, which is tough enough, you're doing a lot of survival swims and things like that, and learning if your body can physically handle, being at altitude where things get depressurized, and just if your body's capable of flying in different aircraft in the Navy. And that's about a month long, and if you survive that and you make it through that, then you can go to SAR school, or search and rescue school, which was in Pensacola, Florida. You have to wait a little while to class up for your class, and then when you do class up, it's 4 weeks if you graduate on time, and it's swimming.
Right, I can imagine. Yeah. I can only imagine. We're talking with retired NYPD Detective Mike Black of the Emergency Service Unit. This is Volume 58 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. For anybody watching via YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, /X, or Facebook, submit a question if you have one, and I'll highlight it at the appropriate time. Now, not to gloss over what it consists of, being in the Navy is challenging enough, but for those of us like myself, not too familiar with militaristic operations on that level, what does a search and rescue school consist of, and what is it training you to have you do in the field potentially?
So yeah, like I said, after you finish air crew school, you'll go to SAR school, and from that point on, it's basically just a physical test. You're running all the time. You're swimming more. Push-ups, pull-ups, and getting your body ready to be able to jump out of a helicopter and potentially rescue somebody, and learning all about different kind. So if a pilot ejects out of an airplane, there's a couple of different systems that they use when they eject or jump out of an airplane, and they're in the water with a parachute. You're learning how to basically remove all that stuff off them while you're in the water, and then swim them over to wherever it is they have to go, usually to a hook that's getting lowered to you from a helicopter. Hook up and then get them to safety.
It's quite literally a do or die mission. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's a do or die mission, and it's circumstances you never hope to be in. But again, the operations are such, even during times of peacetime, training can go wrong, God forbid, and we've unfortunately seen that over the years where you're going to have to do it. And that is certainly something that it's important to be trained for, imperative to be trained for, because you never want to let your fellow man down. That carried over into your police careers. We'll talk about it a little bit, and that was certainly a principle instilled in you during your military career. Now there's A school right after this. It just did not stop. You finish up this in July, and then from July to September, you had a hell of a 2000, my friend. You're in A school. What did that consist of?
Yep. So A school is basically, I went to Aviation Warfare Systems Operator School, or AWA school, which is basically your rate in the Navy. So you pick a job when you sign up. And what that consists of was basically learning about different types of submarines, which was very cool. More involved than I ever thought it was. But in my head, I didn't really care. I wanted to do the jumping out of the helicopter stuff. But yeah, I ended up liking it. It was a 6-month school, and it's basically just learning about different submarines from different countries and how to track them, and being able to kind of pinpoint, basically through sound, and the sounds that each one of these submarines make. You're able to kind of identify exactly what kind of submarine it is, and then kind of either be able to launch a torpedo at it or pass the information off to somebody who can. So it was very cool. It was a very interesting school.
I can imagine. Now, it's interesting because, as I mentioned in the introduction, when you came on to the Navy, it was relative peacetime. Yes, there was the conflagration with Slobodan Milosevic and Kosovo. That was about as one-sided a war as there could possibly be. That was over very, very quickly. But otherwise, it was viewed as a blip on the radar. So in 2000, with that education that you're getting, pre-9/11, people knew about Osama bin Laden, yes, and not too long after this was the bombing of the USS Cole. But as far as potential saboteurs were concerned on the seas, who was the main concern at that time?
At the time I was a kid, and being in the schools, it was just like, this is going to be cool, and you're going to see the world. So none of that really even registered to me. None of it really was a thing. Nobody thought about anything like that. You hear, and obviously, the name of the game is preparation, right? And you want to be good at your job. So when you go to these schools, you're preparing for a potential situation that could happen. And it just so happened that, it did for me, just in a different realm. So,
of course. And then right after this, I mentioned SCRE when I was introducing you. And what that is, for those that don't know, is survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Kind of means what it says. This was your fall. Hell of a summer, like I said, hell of a 2000 period. This was your fall, and this took you quite a bit as well. I think, did it take you to April of 01?
Yeah, my dates are kind of foggy when it came to that stuff. I think it was basically fall of 2000. I remember just getting to my final, like my seagoing squadron, in mid 2001, like right before 9/11. So all the things kind of right before that went so quickly, and it's hard to tell the exact dates, but yeah, I could say probably 2000, late 2000, somewhere around there. I was at SEER school.
And I think the nice thing about it, in terms of your career, is you learned very quickly how to swim in the deep end of the pool. And it's no pun intended, given what a lot of the Navy consists of. But you learned how to thrive, not just survive these situations. It's not one thing to survive these situations. You have to learn to thrive, not just in the situation itself, but under pressure, period, which carried over very well, as we'll talk about, to the NYPD in a little bit. But as it came to what would come next, which was the training with the H-60s, diving out of helicopters is not for the faint of heart. You made it sound like you were just going to grab coffee at the nearby shop, but there's a lot to it, especially when the training is concerned, especially for people who, hey, listen, may not be a fan of heights, but they learn to lock in and work through it. So what was that like? And I imagine that had to be very cool as well.
Oh man, it was cool. It was just cool. Everything about it. So you get your first jump coming out of SAR school, and when you complete all your training, you'll get your first. You swim out to a point, and then an old H3 picked us up, and basically flies you around a little bit, and you get your first ride in a helicopter there, and right before you graduate. So I did my first jump in Pensacola, Florida. Went to A school, and then went to SEER school in Coronado, California. At NAS North Island, finish that up, and then you go to your fleet replacement aircrew school, which is basically now you've finished all your schools and you're gonna learn about the aircraft that you're gonna be flying in. So I was assigned there, and that was where I learned about H-60s and basically how to operate all the machinery in the back of an H-60, and still doing jumps and still doing all that stuff, and jumping in Coronado Bay and having some fun out there. It was good.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a rush and it's adrenaline with capital A. And I
Oh yeah.
imagine the only feeling that could rival it was probably when you were in ESU.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, it's fair to say, of course. Now, peacetime, as I said before, ended, unfortunately, September 11th, 2001. Militaristically in your career, what changed? Where were you assigned after that? Anything significant around that time or not really for you operationally?
Yeah, there's actually a very significant period for me. My dad was an NYPD officer during 9/11. Was a mounted police officer down at Troop A. We used to be Troop A, which I think is now like a counterterrorism building. It's right on the side of the first precinct there.
Hmm.
So he was, right around the corner from it all. And I was in Jacksonville. I had gotten stationed after HS-10. I went to HS-5, which is stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. And that was my seagoing squadron. So 9/11 hit. I was in a helicopter at the time, and the rotor blades were spinning, and we were getting ready to take off, and someone comes running out and tells us to shut down. All air operations got suspended. And we were kind of like, oh, what's that about? And went inside, and I was just in time to see the first tower fall. And my immediate reaction was, oh my God, my dad works right there. My dad, I hope he's okay. And tried to make phone call after phone call, and trying to call my mom. Hey, what's going on with that? Have you heard from him? And couldn't get through. Phones weren't going through at that time. I think, it messed up. Everybody kind of crammed the phone lines, and nobody can get a call through. So it was very difficult. So obviously, being in the military, things start spinning fast when something like that happens.
Right.
So, they basically told us, go home, pack up all your stuff, and get ready to go. And all those cool trips that that we were supposed to go to Ireland, we were supposed to go to all these cool places, Croatia, I think. They were talking about all these nice places to go, and all that was off. At that point, it was you're going to the North Arabian, or wherever we're sending you. So yeah, so we immediately kind of packed our stuff up, and got deployed onto the ship that we had been training on for a short time, which was the USS John F. Kennedy. The older one, CV-67, the one that was in Vietnam, and the ship was it was really not ready to go. It really wasn't ready to go at that time. And I remember the CO of the ship getting fired, and then bringing on a new CO, and it was just a mess. But we got it together. We got it together quick, and it was, all right, you guys are off. See you later. You're heading over, and that was that. A couple days later, I was able to call my dad from the ship. They allowed that. I was a young kid on the ship, and this is usually not allowed for younger sailors on the boat. And they allowed me to get a phone call through to him, and I heard his voice, and it was good to go. I was ready to go after that. So,
right. I mean, it was personal for everyone that lived through that
Absolutely.
time, but it was double personal for you as a New Yorker and as someone, as you said, whose father was a New York City police officer, and I'm sure he had friends that he knew that were lost that day. So, I mean, it
Absolutely.
added to the anger in the aftermath of such a terrible event. So that 3-year period, really until you left in 2004, you mentioned it's a significant period. What else occurred?
So there was actually one thing not a lot of people know, is one of the other guys that was on the ship, one of the pilots, that I actually ended up flying the helicopter for one of my rescues, was his dad was I think he was in the bomb squad, or he knew somebody that was in the bomb squad, who had come from ESU. So right after we started deploying, he got a mail package with a whole bunch of ESU patches and a whole bunch of bomb squad patches. And it was kind of where I learned about ESU. I didn't know anything about it. I was like, what's this? Who are these guys? And then I looked them up, and I was like, that's what's up. That's awesome. New York City's got one of those, that's cool. And I remember putting Velcro on the patch, and I wore it overseas, and ended up, so many years later becoming part of ESU. And that's the patch that's on my dress blues now. So I still have it.
Nice.
I still wear it with pride. So
Nice. And I imagine, so, you come out of the Navy and you come back home in 2004 and rolling into the NYPD, I imagine ESU became a goal for you after that. But even before that, and I've said this before to guys that come from a military background, going to fire or going to PD, not to diminish the intensity of a fire academy or a police academy, but given the type of training you were doing in the military, the police academy had to be a walk in the park for you.
It was different. It was definitely different for sure. So, yeah. So there was no such thing as falling out on runs, in the Navy. And if you did, you were gonna pay some other way. Funny story. I remember another thing is being late. If there is no such thing as being late in the military at all, either you're either 15 minutes to a half an hour early, or you're late, or anything after that, you're late. Whereas we have a funny thing in ESU called ESU time, which is like it's a loose time. We'll get there a little couple minutes. But yeah, I remember one time in particular, and I was a young air crewman, new to the squadron. I was late, and we were doing star jumps that day, and we were leaving on a boat. We were going to take a boat out and then jump out of the boat, basically swim out to a point, and then get picked up by a helicopter, and then fly around, do our jumps, do our quals and all that stuff. And I was late, and like the boat's not waiting. Like that little boat is not waiting for you. So I was literally running, across the flight, the flight area to the seawall, and the boat had took off, and I had my gear on. I just grabbed my fins and basically put them on, and I had to jump out from there and swim after the boat. And they were nice enough to wait about half a mile out to where I had to swim to them, and then I got on the boat, dogging it, and we continued our operations then. But and then you go to the NYPD Police Academy, and people falling out on runs, show up here and there, and you're like, oh my God, like it's a little looser, but it's it's nice to have that a little bit of relaxation now too. So
yeah. No, I mean, if you can get through military training in any branch, not just the Navy, but any branch, anything else after that, not to diminish its intensity, but it's a walk in the park, all things considered. And certainly, of course, I imagine, especially with the PT stuff, you didn't have any issues there. Made it to the end of the finish line just fine. Got on the job. I went to Brooklyn, of course. So it wasn't long. Of course, you spent more time in the 9-4, which I'll touch on. But that 6-month period in the 7-9, busy house, one of the busier houses in Brooklyn, working in the impact zone. Tell me about that.
It was an eye-opener. They give you the dream sheet in the academy, and they give you 3 choices, and none of mine were in Brooklyn. All of them were in Manhattan, and of course they're like, "Oh, great, cool story. You're going to 7-9." I'm like, "Oh, well, where's that? That's not Manhattan." So did impact in the 7-9 and ended up falling in love with Brooklyn. It was great. It was great for me. I enjoyed it. I made some great friends in the 7-9 that I still talk to today. My partner, Alana Anthony, I'm sure she might, I hope she doesn't mind if I mention her name, but yeah, great friend. I still talk to her to this day. Learned a lot. Obviously you're out on the street by yourself, and, kind of hanging out with the people that you just came out with, and you learn the job. You learn how to handle things, how to handle the job. So.
And I know in the 70s and 80s, really until the early 90s, rookies were put in the neighborhood stabilization unit. That went away, went to a field training unit. Was the impact unit basically the modern 2000s version of NSU?
I think so. I don't know what NSU was like, but I can imagine, in the way that the NYPD likes to, change the names, but keep it the same deal kind of thing. But I don't know much about the NSU thing, but impact was just basically, throw you out in the street and higher crime areas and try and, it was a great way, I think, for young guys to learn how to do the job. There's no denying that. Got a little crazy at times, and you needed to call back up, and things have changed since then. 7-9 isn't the 7-9 that I remember, but
right.
But yeah, it was great place to learn. It was a great place to learn.
And if you're unfamiliar with the area, it's a great way to learn the community, because people, and now this isn't necessarily directed at criminals in a community, just people who have lived there a long time, law-abiding citizens, they know who's new and who's been there a hot minute. So even though you weren't there too long before you went to the 9-4, it's a good way to learn, okay, who's where, who are the important members of the community, who are the good people, who are the not so good people I need to keep an eye on. Because if you're from there, great. But if you're not, it's a hell of an education. It's a crash course, basically.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
No, it was
And
good. I actually remember we had a Subway sandwich shop that was right across from my post or whatever, and I remember going in there, and Humphrey was the owner, and he's a solid guy, man. I don't know, uh, it was cold when we were there, so he'd let us kind of hang out in there. And yeah, you kind of just learn. I'm from St. James, Long Island, right? And then I joined the Navy, and then I come back, and then I'm put in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, which I know nothing about, right? So there's me, kind of fish out of water, and yeah, just learn in the community and learn, hey, this is how it's just different than what I knew. So
right, right. And then comes the summer of '06, and it's an interesting time because this is Ray Kelly's NYPD, the second time. And this is considered, looking back, I mean, not to say it was perfect. There's pressures and frustrations with every job in every era. This was really the glory years of the NYPD,
Yeah.
or one of the glory periods of the NYPD, because this was a time where, believe it or not, my friends, you could actually be a cop and do cop things in New York City.
right.
So going to 9-4, it's a bit of I remember our buddy Mike Saleo, who was a 9-4 guy, talking about it when he came on the show a while ago. 9-4 was night and day from the 7-9. Not to say it didn't have its moments, but that had to feel like, in a good way, where the heck am I?
Yeah, it did. It did for sure. Yeah, I ended up in the 9-4. I got there, summer of whatever year it was, 06, I guess, 07 maybe, 06, right?
Yep.
And yeah, just complete different animal. I remember, in Impact, you're working with guys that your peers from the police academy, right? And then you go to a precinct where you're working with guys that have been there for a while, and now you're in that mix. Now you're on patrol, basically. You're learning how to do patrol work. And yeah, it was different. Not a lot of crime, a little bit more funhouse stuff going on in the 9-4, and it was a good time there for sure.
I can imagine. I mean, 6 years, just about 6 years there before you ended up in STS. So, I mean, again, we talked about learning the community. Like I said, I'm sure there were still moments where you had to make arrests and keep an eye out for certain things. But as far as learning the community there, it's a really nice part of Brooklyn, which has a lot of nice parts, like of course, what all the boroughs do. Tell me about the fun of that and some of the rewarding moments that came out of that as patrol guy.
I live here now. I still have an apartment here, and I'm currently trying to move down to South Carolina, or I did move down there, but I'm holding down 2 apartments right now. But
God bless.
Yeah, I love it. I love Greenpoint. It's different. The people at Greenpoint now are different than when I started there. It was very Polish neighborhood. And again, I don't speak Polish. I don't know anything about the Polish community. So again, it was a big learning curve for me there.
Right.
But different crime, obviously. Patrol was good for me. I hadn't, I got worked with another guy from the 7-9 originally, who was very different from me. We had different outlooks on things, but made it work. Kept it moving. Tried my hand at the. It was actually kind of challenging for me in the 9-4, and I'll say that because, I was definitely a go-getter. Like, I really wanted to be out there, and I wanted to do stuff, and I wanted to really, be challenged with things, but I couldn't really figure out the right way to do that. So I wanted to do, of course, every young kid on the job wants to go to crime, right? You want to do the plainclothes thing, and you want to, make arrests and do all these cool things and jump out and do this.
Right.
I sucked at it, and I was terrible. I was a terrible crime cop. I will never, I'm sure people hear the show, they'll be laughing their heads off at that, but I was terrible. And I ended up going back to patrol at the end, and rightfully really? So. That's where I belonged. I did much better on patrol, answering the radio jobs, and I did well there. I excelled in that part of the job. So, so it took a while for me to find my niche, I guess. And soon after I went back onto patrol, I applied to ESU and really pushed for that, where I kind of lacked in the precinct stuff and the crime stuff and the condition stuff. I knew that I'd be able to excel. I knew that I'd be okay in ESU. I knew that I could do that.
And listen, there's a lot of guys who go into plain clothes. Back then, it wasn't street crime anymore because Kelly did away with that in 02, but they still had anti-crime for the longest time. There's a lot of guys that go in there, excel at that, are able to get a gold shield out of it, and do very well with that type of police work. But let me just say for the record, and I've said this many times before in the program, those of you who've listened a long time have heard me say it. There's nothing wrong with staying on patrol. If you can stay on patrol your whole career and have a great time. And there's a lot of really good patrol cops out there, and where would we be without them?
Patrol's a good gig.
It's not a bad gig at all. I agree 110%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you become that senior guy or gal, you can mentor others. And listen, a marked unit is just as good as an unmarked unit, depending on the context of the neighborhood. So listen, if you excel at it, you excel at it. But then, of course, came 2012. You had your introduction to ESU shortly after 9/11 with the friend you mentioned. And, of course, now comes the chance to actually get into the unit. And it's an interesting time, once again, to get there. Now, compared to the naval training, now, SDS is 9 months now. At your time, it was 6. So compared to the training you were getting in the Navy, how intense was STS by comparison?
It was different. I wouldn't say it was any less intense. I would say that just a different type of training, where it was, in the Navy, it was very much you are a rescue swimmer, and that's what you do, right? That's your job. ESU, you got a lot of hats, to wear. You have to be good enough to do all of them, right? You're doing scuba, you're doing rope rescue, you're doing tactics, you're doing all the things, and it can be very intense. I remember rope rescue training was difficult, and I didn't think it was going to be that hard. It was challenging training. Being comfortable at higher heights, hanging off buildings and stuff like that, I was okay with that stuff. But learning the technical stuff like the knots and learning what systems to use for this and that was challenging, and it was great. I loved it. Loved all of it.
Yeah, it pushed you to your limit, but in a good way. And during that time, who were the SDS instructors you had during that time?
Oh, that was Randy Miller. Randy Miller was a rope guy. Yeah. Good guy, good trainer, good instructor. People. Yeah, he's tough. He's definitely a tough guy.
Yeah, that he is. Yeah.
But yeah, knew his job very well and taught it well. I had Kenny Green. Kenny Green's another guy. Another really good rope guy. So I had those two guys, and they're the ones that I remember learning the most from.
Yeah, I mean, Randy. Randy watches this show, brother, and I say this lovingly. Quit ducking me. I'm kidding, of course. I love you, Randy. Come on the show. We got to set our date, Randy, for you to come on the program. I know you got some stories. So I got to shoot Randy a text and see when we can coordinate that, because I'd love to hear, of course, all his years in emergency. Mm-hmm. And of course, getting out to 8 truck. If I remember correctly, 8 truck, does it run out of the 6.8?
It's running out of the 9.0.
9.0. Okay, I was way off with that. All right, so getting to 8 truck at that time, I think, okay, give me the layout of the area and just being a new guy and the veteran E-men in that truck that helped you out at the time.
Yeah, right back in Brooklyn North. Again, I fell in love with it. I love Brooklyn. I like being there. Knew the area for the most part. I came from the 7.9, so I knew the 7.9. I knew the 9.4. I knew the 9.0 from being in between those, and then just learning, 8.1, 8.3. It's a big command, and it's centrally located. We had a lot of the equipment, so if something were needed, I kind of like the idea that, hey, I could bring that, to these guys, or I could, bring that piece of equipment to these guys for whatever job it was. So that was part of my thought process and trying to get over to 8 truck, and I did, thankfully, and absolutely loved every minute being there.
And as we'll talk about as we go on the podcast tonight, Volume 58 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, our guest being retired NYPD ESU Detective Mike Black. Now, that being said, for those that don't know, and hi to my friend Sam Katz, great author of a couple of ESU books in the mid-'90s, and yes, I appreciate your compliment on the shirt, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Is that the size of the borough is such that there's 3 ESU trucks assigned to it. There's Truck 6, Truck 7, and of course your command Truck 8. Most of the other boroughs, with the exception of Staten Island, which just has 5 truck, have 2 trucks per borough. Brooklyn has 3, which tells you, of course, the vast size of the command. And I'll ask you this, because different trucks have their specialty jobs. Like, for example, 9 and 10, especially 10 being so close to the highway, pin jobs are common over there. You go down to 1 truck, it's probably more high-rise stuff because of the nature of where they were. For 8, was it a mixture of everything, or was there a specialty job, either rescue or tactical, that 8 truck would get a lot of?
I would say, we shared the bridges with 1 truck, so we would share the rope jobs.
Jumpers.
So we'd get those. We had a lot of tactical jobs, I'd say. I think those were kind of our bread and butter at 8 truck. We had to be ready for water rescues. We had an ESV that we had to have ready to go. So I would say those are the core ones that we really got the most of were the barricades and EDPs and then all the things that go along with those, rope jobs and barricades turning into rope jobs and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. Up here in Connecticut, we call them 17s or psychs. And I used to work commercial EMS before I got to my current job while I build towards being a fireman, hopefully in the near future. And, when we would go to those, there were so many times, especially after getting to know you guys, I'm like, I wish I had an ESU up here, man. We could have used you guys in a lot of those jobs. I'm like, I don't want to be here. But, listen, we didn't have the luxury of having an emergency service up here. And I'll tell you, you bring up an interesting point as well. And I wanted to ask, I know 2 truck has it. I think you guys have it too. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys got the TCV for the bomb squad too?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay,
I have that. I think we still have it. As far as I know, I haven't been back there in a while. So,
Briefly, before we continue with the other jobs, for those that don't know what that is, if you haven't watched the Bomb Squad miniseries, we got Tales from the Boom Room. TCV is a total containment vessel. It's had different variations over the years, but essentially it's in 2 truck in Harlem, and it's also in 8 truck in Brooklyn. The emergency service unit assists the bomb squad at these jobs. They help the guys get dressed. They take the suit off. God forbid if a bomb tech gets hurt, everybody in ESU is at least an EMT. Some are even paramedics. They can aid the bomb technician if, God forbid, they go down for whatever reason. And if it's determined by the bomb squad they can't render the device safe right then and there where it was originally planted, they have to carefully remove it, put it in the TCV, and then very carefully drive out to Rodman's Neck in the Bronx, where it can safely be detonated without harming anyone or anything. So that's a big job. Were you ever on a job where a working device was found and you had to make that drive down to Rodman's Neck?
I personally wasn't. I've heard of it. I've heard of it happening, but I personally wasn't on any of those jobs. But it's another one of those pieces of equipment that you got to know how to use and be ready. I will say that we have been there on bomb squad jobs. I've handled them, personally. Watching them get set up and helping them and kind of preparing for that, if one of them go down, being, getting ready to get them out of harm's way and get them to, medical treatment. We have done a few of those jobs, but as far as, an actual device, being planted in the TCV, I haven't been part of that.
Yeah, no, well, thank goodness. I believe the way the process works is if a patrol cop finds a device or is alerted to a suspicious looking device, the patrol officer then has to request emergency service, and emergency service will then request the bomb squad. And basically, and you guys know this, the running joke about the bomb squad is they're lovingly / jokingly referred to as Truck 11 because many of its members are often former emergency service cops. So, it's 2 elite units to be a part of. And you weren't a part of the other one, and that's okay. Some people are made for that, some people are not. But you were certainly a part of one in ESU. And again, continuing on with jobs, there's the rescue jobs too. And we think of the big ones, the building collapses, something goes wrong with construction, and you're going there all of a sudden to pull workers out. But there's also even something as simple as keys stuck down a drain or the pin jobs like we talked about. Tell me about some of those really rewarding rescue jobs where you got there and looked bad, but at the end of it, you were like, damn, we really made a difference here.
I could think of one in particular, and I was a guest in first squad, and we had a jumper on the Brooklyn Bridge, and the guy had basically rope climbed up one of the cables to the main cable and went all the way to the top of the bridge and was hanging over. And I happened to be the ERM that day, the extra guy, and with first squad, they were, generous enough to make me the extra guy. So I could kind of, sit back a little bit that day. But that job came over. And I remember the 2 guys that were there. I don't know if they want me to mention their names, but I got to be part of that job. Brought up the equipment for them, set them up, and watch them do a great job talking this guy down, and then we had to lower the guy down, and that was a whole procedure. I remember Rob Savori. I remember him being there, and he was a close friend of mine, and we were looking at each other. We had gone through training together. And I remember just looking at him and laughing and being like, "Man, this is crazy stuff that we're doing here." Just,
I miss him.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Rob, when I see you again, I'm going to hug you, and then I'm going to fight you for leaving us like this. Good man, good man. Out of one truck, his dad, of course, Bob, a legendary E-man, out of one truck in his own right. We miss you, buddy. It's going to be 2 years in July. And his brother, John,
brother as well.
For a little bit. Yep. John just retired recently. Congratulations, John. Hope you're doing well, my friend. And enjoy retirement, brother. You definitely earned it. And Robbie, miss you, brother. Miss you a lot. And so, again, and that's another thing you mentioned, too, the bridge jobs. Because I remember Kevin Kusler talking about that. He was a veteran E-man for many, many years out of one truck. Depending on not who's available per se, but who's closest, you can beat, listen, and it's not said in a bad way, you can get there before one truck or vice versa, because it's literally a split in terms of those jumper jobs. And depending on the weather and depending on the psychological state, some are more disturbed than others. And I'm not trying to say that in a funny way. There are those that are going through jilted lover type things, lost a loved one recently. Then there are those who have legitimately diagnosed mental illnesses that are up on those bridges. But that is a lot. You got the airbags in case they jump. You also have harbor down below. And it brings up an interesting component of emergency service training. We know about EMT, but there's also EPT, emergency psychological technician, where really kind of like HNT talks about, the skill is not what to say, but it's how to listen to the person.
I would agree with that 100%. I think, people on the outside might have this perception of ESU. A lot of times it has to do with the tactical stuff and seeing us out there on cat cars and all kitted up and ready to go. But I would say that the majority of our jobs required talking to people and being able to talk to people and being able to listen and being able to understand the right way to talk in any given situation. Sometimes or not talk, or sometimes just stay quiet, right? But I would say that that's probably the majority of the job is being able to talk to people, and if it'd be very hard for you to do the job if you couldn't,
Right.
I know that.
Right. It's a balancing act. And,
Absolutely.
even it doesn't change even when you get to a specialty unit like ESU. And what I like about ESU compared to other tactical squads around the country, around the world, this is no knock to any of the elite SWAT units that exist around the country. And we certainly appreciate what they do, but they don't patrol. You guys still at your core never leave the first function of the police officer before they move on to anything else, which is patrol. And you're still a police officer at the end of the day. And besides those big jobs, it's two guys riding around on an REP. You can stumble upon anything. And you mentioned talking. Sometimes it's the little favors you can do for the public. Oh, shoot, I dropped my keys down the drain, like I mentioned. Sometimes you can stumble into an active situation where you're putting cuffs on somebody. You're not taking the collar because that's going to take forever a day paperwork, but you're at least slapping the cuffs on. And again, talking is a big part of that too. And a lot happens in a two-man REP for a tour.
Sure, absolutely. There's countless things. I can probably sit here all night with you and go through a bunch of things. That we've done and helpful things. That's part of the. So the funny thing that you mentioned now is Greenpoint. Greenpoint now. I live here, and I listen to people, especially the other side of the political spectrum, talking about how we're not great to one part of the community, and I can tell you to a man, daily, we help a lot of people. We help a lot of people, right? Whether it's something minor like dropping their keys down the sewer, or talking someone off a ledge, or putting handcuffs on somebody in a tactical situation, right? We help a lot of people daily. So it bothers me sometimes when you sit down and after I got home from a good job, let's say, and you sit down and you go to the bar and you grab a beer and you listen to some punk talking crap, next to you, and you're like, man, I just did this for this person or whatever. I helped this person out, so much, and you're talking about all the other stuff that, So.
And herein lies the problem. Like, even something as simple as, hey, I'm locked out of my car. Can you help me get back into my car?
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Something like that. They don't see that. And social media has made it worse because social media takes clips without context. Water's wet, unfortunately, these days with that. Puts it out there and paints this narrative. And I'll say it bluntly. Look at me. I'm half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. I'm a minority. You wouldn't think somebody like me, because of, unfortunately, how social media is, would support the police. And yet, again, I always say to people that are surprised when they see my viewpoints, not that I get political, but I've always been a supporter of first responders on both sides of the aisle. where it's like, get off social media, talk to them, meet them, be around them. Yes, there are certain people in fire and police, unfortunately, that slip through the cracks, shouldn't be in the profession. That's every job. But talk to them. They are people just like you. They have their likes and dislikes just like you, and they are trying to help and make the community a better place, the community that you want it to be. But because you'd rather be on Twitter and see these 90-second clips that don't paint the full story, here we are now with this bullcrap narrative. And if there's anybody that hates it, it's me, because especially after 2020, it really discounted so much of the good that not just ESU does, but the NYPD as a whole does for the community.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and again, emergency is kind of a shining light of that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, not at all. Didn't have anything for you. Didn't have anything to add to that.
So I don't know if you ever, I'm sure you did, and if you didn't, then hey, correct me. But did you ever get, and this is why I asked this, knowing the REP is important. You learn the REP, you learn to drive the REP. It's essentially a mini toolbox, which I love. And then you graduate eventually, not that you ever stop driving the REP per se, but you do graduate eventually to the big truck, especially for those larger jobs. And it's important because that's a giant toolbox to know everything that's on it. If guys come up to you, we were talking about earlier with tools, and they say, hey, I need this off the truck, you can't look like a deer in the headlights. You got to know where it is, what it's about, and you can grab it like the back of your hand. When it came to that, what was that like for you? And just getting to the point, if you did, of being a trusted chauffeur for trucking?
I absolutely was, and I could tell you a great story about it. I had been, like a lot of us do, you get a little lazy when you're with the REP, and you've kind of been, pushing the REP around a little bit, and then you pass your year, and then you can venture upstairs a little bit, and sit down for a longer cup of coffee and watch some TV a little bit maybe, but. I fell victim to that, and then it came time for me to do my chauffeur test, and I'll say his name because he taught me a good lesson this day. Was Mike Cook. I was like, Mike, I'm ready to be a chauffeur. I think I've been telling him, and he's like, okay. Grabbed a cup of coffee, went downstairs, and started the test, and he pulled something out and asked me, okay, do this. And I was looking at him like a deer in the headlights, and I was like, man, I don't know. And he's like, okay, better luck next time. And went right back up the stairs, and I was like, oh man, it was a humbling experience for me. And I remember getting my butt down there and really, getting into it after that, and knowing that truck, it was just, I thought I was ready. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I had it good to go. And he humbled me quick, and I at that point shut up and got to work, and really tried to do it right the next time. So
right, and that's how you learn. Nobody's going to hold your hand. Nobody's going to do it for you.
Nope.
Sometimes it's just you are the man in the arena, and sometimes it's on you. And much like a good pump operator for a fire engine really makes the job go smoothly, a good truck chauffeur for an ESU truck, same thing. Because if you're able to know that truck, and a guy doesn't have to wonder, does he even know what I'm talking about? Or where's the tool on the truck to begin with, and can just go to the right compartment without thinking twice and grab it. Those seconds count. They add up, and that can make the difference depending on the job, between somebody going home, somebody making it through the job, depending on who you're trying to help, and somebody going to an early grave.
Yeah, and not just that, just the communication piece as well is very difficult, right? So while you're doing all that stuff and finding tools and equipment for the guys that need it, you're getting, two radios in your ear, and you're talking to one person and passing information to this person. And also people are coming up to you at the back of the truck, asking for information. What do you need? And being able to kind of coordinate that is very challenging. It can be very challenging, and it's a tough job. Every job that I think I've been on, where I wasn't the chauffeur, it's pretty customary to thank the chauffeur for, the job that they do. It's a tough job. So.
And even just getting there, I remember making this joke in the program a while ago. They made breakdancing an Olympic sport. I want to offer the petition to have driving an emergency vehicle, especially one of that size, through the streets of New York City, an Olympic sport, because you just can't predict, and especially the more condensed areas. We're not just talking, sorry to say it, stupid drivers doing stupid things. Sometimes it's stupid pedestrians too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they love to get in the way.
It's like, do you not see this giant truck, lights and sirens screaming down the street?
Yep.
Yeah, this is a good time to walk through.
Perfect. Yeah. No, they got to wait for me. It's like, oh, okay, you got it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, on a big job, I mean, obviously, as we know, two guys in an REP, but on a big job, I never asked this before to anybody, so shame on me for not knowing this. When the big truck had to go out, besides you, the sergeant in the front seat, or the lieutenant, depending on who the boss was that night, how many guys were in the big truck heading to the job?
Two, just you and
Just
the
two?
boss. Yeah,
Oh,
normally
wow.
just you and the boss, or if there's no boss, then you have another guy that's there with you, another detective or something that's with you. But yeah, usually U5 or U4 would show up soon after, so you'd have a boss on scene pretty quickly. So
Okay. And then obviously the guys in the RPs are also going to the job, so it adds up in terms of manpower.
they're primarily there, and if we need more people, then we'd call from different trucks. Say, hey, I need if I'm in truck 8 that night, and Adam 8 and boy 8 are on the floor or on the job, and I need more people, then I'll call Adam 1 or Adam 7 or whoever's closest, or whoever has a piece of equipment that we might need at that point. So
Right. And we'll talk about that in a second. And it segues perfectly because one of the great things about emergency, and I don't know how much it happens now, but flying, where for those that don't know, you have your assigned truck. For example, Mike was assigned a truck 8. But if a truck is shorthanded for the day, let's say it's truck 3 in the Bronx, they send Mike to truck 3 in the Bronx to cover that day and make sure the manpower levels out. And that could happen with any of the trucks in the city. So it's great from the standpoint that you get to really learn that truck, its patrol areas, what it does, what type of jobs they normally encounter, and of course the guys, especially if they're newer guys, who work in that truck. And it's great from the camaraderie of the unit. Now you can't say 7 and 6 because they're in your borough. Besides, of course, 7 and 6 in Brooklyn, what were some of your favorite trucks to fly to?
well, guys will laugh at that too because I wasn't a big fan of flying, but I did not that I didn't. I love the guys. Whenever I flew, I go over to whatever truck it was, and we'd have a blast. But it was just I love being in Brooklyn. I love being there. I
Yeah,
love patrolling my own neighborhood, right?
it's home.
But there's a couple of trucks that I really enjoyed going to, and one was one truck. I love the guys there. I learned a lot from those guys. And 4 truck because anytime especially I can speak for 3rd squad and 2nd squad there. 4 truck, they are the funniest people on the planet. Like they are literally, they could leave the job and be comedians. Have a job being a comedian right after that. They are funny dudes up there. So yeah, just for different reasons. I didn't, like I said, there's really no bad truck to fly to. There's really none of them. You make friends with everybody. You kind of know who your guys are and who you like to hang out with, who you like to talk to and stuff, and who you'll be riding with that day. So yeah, I won't, it's not a bad thing to say about any of the trucks. They all have their jobs and they all do it very well. So
Of course. And imagine, for example, just flying a 5 truck, like I mentioned before. That's the only ESU truck for the borough. There's no other truck to cover Staten Island. So imagine, talk about DIY and really go-getter initiative. You can get other trucks to help you if it's a big enough job, but it might be a little bit. So I imagine, for anybody that's ever flown there, that's a real eye-opener considering what those guys have to do. And shout out to all my friends on Staten Island as well. Like you said, no bad truck to go to, a lot to learn, a lot of fun to be had. And the guys make the job.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. Now, in terms of big jobs, like you mentioned, sometimes, as you mentioned, you would need Adam 7. You would need some of these adjoining trucks. What are jobs you can recall where other units were saying, hey, we need additional help, and 8 truck is going where?
Well, I can think of one right off the bat, and it was in 5 truck. Don't remember exactly the year. I want to say maybe it was 2014, maybe, but it was I remember hearing it on the radio at 8 truck with my partner. We were the only ones there, only ones on a midnight at 8 truck. And I think a U.S. Marshal came over the radio and was screaming, "Hey, shots fired," and all that stuff. And he's calling from Staten Island, and ended up being a gang member that barricaded himself in the house and was firing rounds down. So the fire department goes there because he had a smoke grenade that he had popped at the front door. So the marshals thought the building was on fire, so they called the fire department. The fire department gets there, and they don't have any response from the guy inside. They think he might be down, so they kick the door open and go in, and the guy shoots one of the firefighters. So his buddies pull him out and get him to safety or whatever, and now all hands on deck. Anybody that's available come there. So me and my partner flew there. I think we grabbed an REP because the truck obviously has to stay there. We grabbed an REP and shot over there pretty quick. And I remember kind of being one of the first ones there, aside from the guys at 5. and sitting the fire trucks were still parked in the guy's driveway. And me and my partner set up, and I was in one fire truck and he was in the other, using it as cover and just kind of covering a window until, reinforcements got there. And yeah, every couple of minutes the guy was, popping rounds out the window, keep everybody away. It was pretty crazy job. It was pretty insane, but it was the first time I'd actually gotten to see, like, big NYPD come down to a job and seeing how that works, which was, different than what I expected. So for sure. So
Commissioner Bratton.
Yeah.
So. No, of course. And that job, you just jogged my memory, because Tony Lisi was on the show a number of years back. Tony was at that job. I remember Tony talking about that job, and it just, thankfully the fireman survived. But yeah, I think he got shot in the leg. And then I think, did you guys shoot and kill him, or did he kill himself?
Well, he, after a long standoff with the guy and some pretty sketchy things that we did, not in terms of us, but just decisions that were made by the upper chain of the NYPD at that point. After all that kind of went down, he was able to, talk to his mom, and we were all listening, and he kind of said goodbye to his mom and walked out the front door and started shooting and left us no option at that point. And that was that. I remember him not making it through that situation alive, but I forgot how exactly it ended. If it was a suicide or if you guys took him out. Well, it basically was suicide by cop. It was. Yep.
So it pretty much was. And that's the thing, and I'm not trying to be funny when I say this, but for those of you that haven't heard me say this before, with the amount of restraint and the amount of tactics that ESU will use, specifically, if an emergency service cop shoots you, you earned it. You deserve it, because they will literally do everything not to shoot you, to where if they end up killing you, you deserve to die. I'm sorry.
Like I said, the majority of the job is talking, and we're very good at it. And we're most of the time we're able to just talk to people and get them to kind of realize their actions and pull them out to safety most of the time. So. Right.
And that guy was obviously too far gone, and didn't end so well.
He wasn't having it. So.
No, and neither were you guys, thankfully. So good job, all things considered. Thankfully, that fireman survived and ended up being all right. So interesting, evolution here in your career. The A team is so cool. And for those not familiar with it, the apprehension team. So you're doing high risk warrants, what you're doing in the truck as it is, but this is only what you're doing in A team. You're going after the worst of the worst, murderers, drug dealers, gangsters, you name it, people who are very, very volatile. You got to go in and get them. So by this point, it's about a decade in ESU or close to it. Being in the A team for that period, I know it wasn't long because of, unfortunately, what happened in December, but that period there of time, tell me about that experience and how cool that was.
I absolutely loved it. I loved it. And I wouldn't say the majority of them are high risk. We will get those. We will get the high risk warrants, but it's just a warrant service, right? So we're doing the majority of the warrants for ESU. And solely that. It's just one job. That's all we do. And if a bigger job comes along, we'll assist, if asked or if we can, right? I could hear, Steph, leaning forward, listening to me right now as I say that. But yeah, we still wear the patch, and if a job comes over, we're still going to go to it. But primarily the job for the A team is search warrants.
Mm-hmm. Now it's a fun job, obviously, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of teamwork there. They take guys from different trucks and rotate them. What is it, on a 6-month period?
Yep. 6-month period rotation, and then there's the permanent guys that are there.
Right. Was there a point in time, I imagine, though, for as much fun as you were having, like, damn, I missed the truck?
I think I had done 10 years of the truck, and I started kind of getting a little burnt out. I wanted to change. I wanted to do something, and I had always had the A team on the radar. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I always had it on the radar, and kind of was like, is this the right time? Is this the right time to do this? And guys changed there where I might not have gotten along with them as well, or the camaraderie might not have been there as much. And then when I finally did go there, the team that's there, and the team that's there now is phenomenal. They're great guys. We all got along fantastically for the short time that I was there, right? But yeah, I can't say enough about those guys. They're awesome.
I know it's a 6-month rotation. You got your permanent guys there, but if it were up to you, had it not been for the injury, which we'll discuss momentarily, was that the place you were going to try to finish your career out of, if an option like that was available?
I likely would have. I likely would have. I likely would have still been there. I'd still be there,
Right.
now
Right.
if circumstances were different.
Were different. Yeah, and briefly we'll touch on it. So December, you were doing a rappel exercise of that same year, 2022, and sometimes unfortunately things happen in training, accidents happen in training, and people get hurt, and you were hurt. It was a pretty significant leg injury, and a lot of people may remember that story at the time. It's tough, not just physically, it hurts like hell, obviously, that goes without saying, but there's the mental aspect of it too, because you're a go-getter. You want to do the job, you want to get out there, and that's the only thing you've been doing, really, going back to the Navy the last 24, 25 years of your life. You did come back limited duty a month after the injury, but just from the mental standpoint, how tough was that to cope mentally with the recovery process? And talk about the support system that helped you get through.
Yeah. Yeah, I was out for a year. I was out for a year straight, and that was a very, very difficult period for me. I call it right now. I call it, it was practice retirement that year, but it was tough, man. I went through a lot, and mentally, more mentally than physically,
Right.
I'll say. But the support that I had from all the guys, I'll say from A truck, okay, so from the start being in the hospital, all the guys, whoever was available showing up for me, phone calls, I still have text messages from guys, that I look at every once in a while. And it gets me choked up. I have one from Bobby Savori. I have one from him, and I every once in a while I still take a look at that. All those guys were there for me. And it was something that I never, like, I remember kind of doing it, and it's the job, and that's what you do. You take care of your buddies or whatever. But when you're on the other side of that fence, you don't realize how big that is or how important that is. And for me, it was the world. Those guys mean the world to me. So the A-team guys, taking care of my family, they needed a ride somewhere. My dad was I guess nice enough to even show up at Fort Totten, so they didn't have to come pick them up or anything like that. But thank God. But yeah, knowing how that team operates, and having the warrants early in the morning, and guys are tired, afterwards, and training, and have their programs down, and how they do their thing during the day, and then putting all that to a halt, and taking my family around to come to the hospital for me, that meant the world to me. It means the world to me. Still does.
It's a family. It's a family
Yeah.
at the end of the day. And guys are going to
Absolutely.
bust chops. Obviously, that's just the nature of the job, and that means they like it. It's not a bad thing. But when the chips are down, guys are going to be there for you, 110%. And I've seen it. I mean, even me, I'm a civilian. I've never been a cop. I've never been an E-man. I'm just a cop buff. And even the way they've taken care of me over the years with certain things, coming down, or just certain things I've gone through. I mean, especially after my grandfather passed away, so many of you were great to me in the unit. I'll never forget that. I could only imagine how far they would go. And I'm hearing it from you now, from someone that was actually in the unit. And even though it was a tough year, having guys like that, like you said, I can't add to that any more than what you just said. It meant the world. And I could see it in your face.
Yeah, no, it absolutely did. I still try to keep in touch with them. It's actually kind of tough to, you feel like, well, I feel like, I don't deserve that. I don't deserve all the stuff that you get. Right. So it's, yeah, like I said, that year was extremely challenging. Went through a lot, kind of climbing the walls in the beginning. And luckily I had some friends on the outside that helped me out. One of my buddies, thank God, it was a blessing, gave me an Xbox. and man, I got glued to that thing, and it was like, okay, stay on that. And he laughs at, like, I think the guy laughs at me to this day. He's like, man, you spent so much time on, playing this one game, trying to beat it. And it was funny. It got me through a lot. But yeah, everything, anything and everything, without asking, you don't feel like you deserve that level. And when it shows up for you, it's very impactful.
Right. I got to ask you, I'm a PS5 guy, but I got a lot of friends who got Xbox. What was the game of choice? I got to know.
Of course, it was Call of Duty in the beginning.
I knew it.
Yeah, and then it was like any other game that resembled that. And then my buddy got me turned on to this game called Elden Ring. And it sounds so crazy, man. I'm not an Xbox guy at all, but like Now I am now I'm hooked to it, and I'll tune the thing on every once in a while and play for a little while. But yeah, it really got me through that time. It really did.
So Modern Warfare 2 and I think Black Ops 3, for anybody that knows what I'm talking about with Call of Duty, if you want to see prime gaming, just go on YouTube and watch some of the gameplay from that era, because I'm telling you, that is one of the greatest periods of gaming that ever existed. The chat lobbies were also wild. We'll leave it at that. But the gameplay itself was absolutely incredible. So I knew, especially given I'm like, it has to be Call of Duty. So I knew it.
Of course,
you know. Telling me that. But I don't blame you, man.
I didn't even know any other game at that point. I was like, it's got, it's Call of Duty or nothing. So
exactly. I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you, for sure. So at what time did you? Because I think you went down to Floyd Bennett Field. That's where you rounded things out. What time did you get down to the field?
Yeah. So after the year I was out of just rehabbing, and then I had some infection issues that I was dealing with, which took a long time. And the medical division, for all we pick on them about, they were very good to me. Any help that I needed, they were pretty Johnny on the spot with all that stuff. So, shout out to them. Came back a year after. It was January, the January, following year. And I was kind of like in limbo. They didn't really have anything to do with me. They didn't really, know what to do with me. So I was trying to stay down at the A team. I thought I could do some good down there. I was trying to lobby for driving the guys around. I'll just drive the truck. I'll stay down. I'll chauffeur the jobs or whatever. I don't have to do any work and try to do that in a limited capacity. And that was one thing the medical division was like, absolutely not. Like, you're not doing that. So the decision was made for me. You're going to go down to the field and help out there. And I was kind of like, I'm not a field guy. I'm not a desk guy. I love those guys. Like I said, I don't have any issues with the guys down there at all. I love them. And they're very good trainers. They put me in tactics, and, the guys that are doing the job down there now are they're good.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. So me being down there was kind of like, hey, I guess, you can do this. And, it was tough, just a change that was made for me that I didn't necessarily want. But I half-handedly tried to do the job. I can't even say I really, pitched in that much down there. But I did what I could down there, showed up, here and there, and tried to do what I could for them. And that was it. And from that point, I had retired, soon after that. So.
And guys can't hold it against you. I mean, it's just not you. I mean, if it's you, it's you. But if it's not you, I mean, you're a guy that likes to be out in the field, even if it wasn't the truck anymore, and even if it was going to be the A team. It's hard. So guys, I would imagine guys didn't hold that against you.
They didn't. Thankfully. I didn't want to get to the point where it was, being a pest, being in the way, more than anything. And I tried not to do that. I'm pretty sure they'll know, I was in the way a couple of times, I'm sure. And I'm sure that, they were like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And, it was just, and being out for a year, my head was in a different mindset at that point. Like I said, I look back at it now, and it was like practice retirement. So,
right.
You're out for a year, and you're not doing anything. You kind of get good at, all right, well, this is, what my future holds. So better get good at something quick, better do something. And, that's not police related or not, ESU, try to do something. For a while, I was grasping at straws, for sure. I was trying to do something.
Yeah, no, and we'll touch on that momentarily, but I will ask you, I don't know if they drive themselves, but is it possible, or would it have been possible, at least as a light duty guy at the time, or someone returning in limited duty, to drive U4 or U5 around, basically be their aide?
So what I was told is I can't drive in a patrol aspect, to where I could potentially run into something. And then I'm, limited duty. And, I wouldn't have trusted my leg at that point to be able to, maneuver well enough to get out of any kind of dangerous thing or run after. I definitely couldn't run after. I still probably couldn't run after somebody now, but, Yeah, I think that medical division made the right call. It was, we don't want you to do that. You're a liability, basically, with everything that's going on. So I wouldn't want to be a liability to anybody I was with.
No, not at all. Not at all. So, you talk about retirement now. It's not what you envisioned. Of course, you probably wanted to do it a little bit later on. But things happen how they happen, and there is life after the job. So you mentioned getting good at something not police related, not ESU related. It's been almost a year since you left. What's life like these days? I know you're trying to move down to Carolinas, like you mentioned. What are you doing these days?
I do have another job. I've been working kind of part-time with them while I was on the NYPD, and they were another organization that was great to me while I was out. Took very good care of me and called me up and said, "Hey, whenever you want to work, whenever you're ready, give us a call." And they waited for me. So I'm still doing that, and it is sort of law enforcement related. It's teaching, in an aspect of teaching different departments, teaching private security. How to shoot guns and how to, move through a structure tactically. And a lot of them are ex-cops. So it's kind of being, kind of have a home feeling with a lot of that. So
I was going to say, yeah, there's still that camaraderie and that chop busting and that, that sense of, kind of being back in the precinct or being back in the truck. So it's nice. I mean, all things considered, I'm glad that's going well, because especially when one doesn't leave on their own terms and an injury forces them out. I know that can be tough, and I know you miss it, and I that's been evident in our conversation tonight, and I don't blame you. It's a hell of a job. It's a hell of a unit to be a part of, but nevertheless, it seems like you're doing well, and I'm happy to hear that. It seems like you got a good support system, too.
I do for sure. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad to see that. As you reflect back on it, I mean, hell of a lot to be proud of, still a great career, still a long time in emergency service. It was a great run there. How would you look back on not just the ESU years, but your NYPD years in general?
Right now, I think I'm still trying to, sum it all up.
Right. Still so new.
It is still pretty new. I've kind of, been forced to, you got to put it behind you, which was a challenge enough as it was. And now that it is kind of behind me, I'm trying to look forward. But they were priceless years, man. They're definitely, 20 years of my life that were a story, man. It was a lot of fun. A lot of the guys that I knew, especially from ESU, are awesome guys, man. They're really good people, and
yes, they are.
I feel fortunate enough to have that, because I don't think there's a lot of people out there that get to witness that or be part of that or something like that. So that was very important to me. That is very important to me, and it'll always stay with me, and always have the the patch is tattooed somewhere in my heart, but it's good. But it's over, so now I'm just trying to push forward. So, I mean, just from and guys that I don't even know. I mean, when I got injured, one of the guys had called my wife, and then, highway was called. I don't know really. I know one guy from highway, I think, and the whole highway unit got involved and was ready to pick her up where she works and drive her to the hospital. They were talking about getting a helicopter because she works a little bit far away. I was like, this is like what? Like, it was crazy. It was really crazy. And having an organization like that, or having people pull together for one guy and me of all people, is amazing. It's I'll obviously never forget being a part of that organization. As crazy as that sounds to some people, I do miss it sometimes. So.
Yes, it's humbling, and I always use the line from the old Steppenwolf song: "It's a magic carpet ride." It really is.
It is for sure. Yeah.
It's got a lot of twists and turns along the way, but man, if you can, as they all. And you heard this a million times over the course of your career. It's the greatest show on earth, and you had a backstage pass.
I think, backstage pass. I think we were on the stage a lot too.
You were the stars of the show, especially in an emergency. You're it. Yep. So we'll get to the rapid fire, which tonight is brought to you by our buddy Vince over at Arbor Tuff.
When it comes to firehouses, the floors take a beating. Boots, waters, tools, apparatus traffic, it just never stops. That's why departments like the Gloucester City, New Jersey Fire Department and so many others trust Armor Tuff flooring and tile. From the hallways to the training rooms to the apparatus bays, Arbor Tuff delivers a clean, professional finish built to handle the daily grind of the job. Durable, seamless, and designed specifically for high-demand public safety environments, this isn't just flooring, it's infrastructure you can count on. And it doesn't stop at the floor. Take a look at the Grove's gear racks, built with integrated security features to protect turnout gear, personal equipment, and department assets. Secure storage, smart design, and built to last, because your gear deserves the same protection you provide to your community. If your department is ready to upgrade its space from the bay floor to the gear room, reach out to Armor Tuff Flooring and Tile, built for the fire service, built to last.
And before we get to the rapid fire, the commercial reminds me, since it's fire service team, quick shout out to all my friends in the West Haven Fire Department here in Connecticut. I was able to partake, of course, being a volunteer in bailout training, which saw me channel a little bit of ESU and rappel down a building. So shout out in particular to Kevin, Lieutenant Kevin Sweeney, who did not throw me out the window and aided me in that training. Had a lot of fun. So thanks to everybody that assisted those last couple of days. Rapid fire, of course, 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. You could say pass if you want. First question being, of course, there is STS, and that's hard, like we talked about. Then there's actually getting to the truck, learning the guys, learning the layout. I mean, Brooklyn North was home, so that part wasn't hard. What was harder, though? STS or being a new guy, learning your colleagues and learning that truck?
Oh, learning the truck by a long shot. Learning how to all the intricacies of being an E-man, and getting to your truck and being a new guy is is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say that. Yeah.
Sounds like it. Now, I know I originally framed the second question as biggest difference, but I'm going to reframe it if you don't mind. And I'm going to say Navy search and rescue work was very cool. What similarity or what skill did you take from that training that in a similar sense you modified and applied to being an E-man?
I mean, the swimming. And as a matter of fact, while I was in the trucks a couple of times, they'd call me down to whenever they did the workups for people that were going to be in the upcoming ESU class. They have the swim test that they have to go through. So I go down and help them with the swim test and demonstrate how they'd have to do each swim and things like that. So I carried that with me. I carried that and also definitely carried the mindset of being a Navy SAR swimmer is definitely it's tough, and the culture there is different from the NYPD in terms of it's so competitive and not that it isn't in ESU, but the competitive nature in the Navy is scary.
Yeah.
Scary. Like you think you're catching up to somebody and you think you're getting there, and then the bar gets raised, quick, and you realize you're not there yet. So yeah, that's what
intensity on steroids.
Oh yeah.
Boy. A quick question here in the rapid fire, actually from one of our viewers. Just B888. Does Mike, and this Mike, the better Mike of the two, does Mike think the NYPD should develop a larger full-time tactical element, more like LAPD SWAT? You said the dirty word. Dirty word, just B. You're not supposed to say that.
Yep, Steph's head spinning around in a circle right now.
Yeah, sorry, Steph. I didn't say it, Steph. I know better. That's just me. That wasn't me. I know better. So the answer to that question is no. It's pretty expansive as it is there, just be.
Yeah, I think the A team, does the SWAT work, special weapons and tactics and stuff like that, and they do a great job of it. They're, like I said, those dudes are pushing the chain, pushing it forward pretty well right now. And then being in ESU, being in the trucks is another animal altogether. You're on patrol, and there's a lot of things to respond to, and there's a lot of things to be responsible for. So, yeah, I'll say I think it's set up well.
They're pretty good. And listen, I tease. I thank you for the question. I'm not trying to clown you in any way. I don't want you to feel bad. It's a valid question. Mm-hmm. But think about it. There's 10 trucks throughout the city. You also have a WMD team. You also have a hazmat team down at the field. There's, of course, the instructors down at the field as well, and the bosses, and you, of course, mentioned the A team as well. So New York City, as far as specialized operations on the police side is concerned, is pretty well covered. And we're not even talking harbor, and we're not even talking aviation. So things are more than copacetic on that front.
We're all handling our biz. We're all doing it. So.
That's for sure. Third question, the rapid fire. And this is framed more in an uplifting context. What's one call for a positive reason from Truck 8 that you'll never forget? A very uplifting job, rescue or tactical or otherwise.
Um, I would say a truck second squad. We had a jumper one day this one kind of stood out to me. Um, Jumper on top of a bridge in the 90. And just I remember being up on the rooftop and talking to this guy, and he was upset that he got rejected by a girl, and I think he was just at wit's end and hanging his legs off the edge of this building, getting ready to jump, and people all saw him and called, and we show up, and the guys at A Truck and Second Squad, my squad, who I love dearly, um, we did a great job, had everything set up, and then we just kind of took turns and talked to this guy, and were able to kind of talk him in the way that we did, um, and walk them out, and that's one that stands out to me. Thought it was a very good job. I thought we did it. I thought it was just done professionally as it gets.
Yes, and as someone that's been rejected by a girl before, let me just give advice to anybody that is in that situation. When it happens, don't get that drastic. You get in your car, you blast Dave Matthews Band, specifically Crash Into Me. You drive home, you maybe shed a tear or two, and you go to sleep. And you wake up the next day and life goes on. It's okay. There's life after, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So take it from a guy who's been there. It's never that bad.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be Dave Matthews, whatever the song of your choice, but it's life goes on, man. There's other girls.
There's other girls, there's other fish in the sea. Joe Maliga, by the way, you guys are throwing these questions in late, but I appreciate it. Before I continue with the rapid fire, this is a running joke between him and I. He's one of my regular viewers. Did you ever deliver a baby between patrol and ESU?
No.
Okay. All right. So that's a no for us, Joe. We got the yes column, the no column. That one's going to go in the no column. Mm-hmm. Fourth question, rapid fire. Best piece of advice you got as a young E-man getting a truck?
Oh, man. I'll say this. I can't use any curse words, but I'll say a lot of it is, don't mess it up. That's a good piece of advice. Don't mess it up. Whatever it is, don't mess it up. And then one actual thing that I can think about, one of the guys who was an unlikely guy that, we ended up kind of having a falling out toward the end a little bit. But one thing I remember him telling me was, you have to find balance, and I didn't necessarily even know what he was talking about at the time. And then being able to kind of balance things in your life. And I think that was pretty good advice. When you're at work, you give it 100% here. And then when you're at home, you give it 100% there. And then being able to juggle and make sure that you're giving enough time to all of it, whatever it is in your life, so that was a good piece of advice for me. Life balance. Yeah.
And that's certain. And there's not a lot of good developments about my generation, but my generation is very good with that. That and the mental health, work-life balance, mental health is something we're very vocal about. So that right there is a good piece of advice. Last question, rapid fire. Wearing the NYPD patch is an honor in and of itself. Wearing that emergency patch is an even bigger honor because it's a club very few have got the chance to be a part of over the years.
Absolutely.
In 96 years it's been in existence. When you look back at having worn that patch, what does that mean to you?
It's a major portion of my life. It's a big portion of my life. Is wearing that patch, and I wear it with pride. And I always, I never, every day, you put that uniform on, you have that patch on, you have to earn it. You have to earn that patch, and doing that for long enough, like I said earlier, it kind of gets tattooed in your heart. It just becomes who you are for a little while, and then you have to find balance at that point. Right. Yeah, it meant the world to me. It meant the world to me to wear that patch and to do the best I could for the guys around me. And working with the guys that I worked with are like I said, you're not going to be able to get that experience many other places. And I'm proud to have been in a position to be with those guys.
It's an elite fraternity to be a part of, and to have been a part of it. Again, there's very few that can be said for that. It is an honor and a half. And again, even if things didn't end the way you envisioned, it's still a lot to be proud of.
Absolutely.
Mike, this was awesome. We'll talk off air, so don't sign off just yet. But before I say goodbye to the audience and promote the next episode, if there's any shout outs you want to give to anyone or anything, the floor is yours. Fire away.
Oh, everybody in ESU. If I never got a chance to thank you for all the things that you did for me when I was out injured, thank you. Thank you now. I'll never forget you guys, and keep on trucking. Keep going.
Keep going. Stay safe. especially because it's getting hotter out. So summertime always yields a lot of interesting jobs. And I'm praying, and I love all of you, but I am praying you guys are going to have extra duty in June if the Knicks are able to go all the way. And we'll have a ticker tape parade. It will be logistically impossible and a pain in the neck to plan. But my friends, it will be worth it as the Knicks prepare to aggravate me for the next couple of months when they start the playoffs Saturday night and take more years off my life than they already have. So Thanks again, Mike. We'll stick around
Thank you, Mike.
Talk briefly off air. It was a lot of fun talking to you tonight. All right. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. Appreciate you guys as always. Appreciate the questions in the chat. And again, you guys are just an amazing audience, and you're the lifeblood of the show. There's no show without you guys. So my tip the cap, as always. Coming up next in the Mike Black podcast. So she's down in Philly now on 6 Action ABC News, but she used to be on News 12 in New York City and also on Channel 2. I've known her for a bit. I've been bothering her enough. So finally, my annoyance paid off. Maggie Kent, formerly known as Magdalena Doris, is going to be here. That's going to be a pre-recorded interview I'm doing next Tuesday. You're going to get it next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Maggie's a good sport, so she'll be coming on. And I look forward to talking with her about her career in journalism, of course, the New York years and what she's doing now down in Philly. And who do we have after Maggie? I'm trying to see who else is next up on the docket. Nobody for next week, but I think April 29th. Kevin Kubler is actually coming back on the show. He's got his book out, of course, so that'll be another volume of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FTNYC. So stay tuned for that as we talk about his book and do a little author's corner with him, of course. For those of you listening on the on the audio side, from their 1993 album Down with the King, Queens' own Run DMC bids us farewell this evening with Down with the King. In the meantime, on behalf of Mike Black and all of you in the audience, and producer Vick, who is not here tonight, here in spirit, I am Mike Colón. This has been Volume 58 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. We'll see you next time, and as the E-Men like to say, anytime, baby. Take care.